Hi, good afternoon everyone. It's Erkan Ali here with Gill, Tiney and our extra special guest, Paul Baker.
Yes,
welcome.
Thank you.
So how many miles did you travel to join us today?
A couple, 100 or so.
See, I travel 100 miles for one of your smiles. Well, welcome Paul. It's lovely to have you here. And I think we're going to have a really quite an interesting, in-depth conversation, but I would like to invite you to just maybe set us on the scene with the subject we're going to spend some time around today, systemic win. One of the things we're committed to today in this conversation is to really highlight and demonstrate the principles, challenge them slightly.
A lot.
Good. and see what we can unravel. And I think that's what we're here for. But is there anything you'd like to say about being on the podcast for the first time?
No, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to doing some more after this. Get them even better.
Get you going.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's going to be so much stuff. You're going to have me back.
Indeed. I always feel there's a part two coming with you when you've done any known be knowns or anything in the community. Do you want to set this conversation up for a systemic win? People are going to be going, what the hell's that?
Yeah. So I think the world actually is based on systemic win. But it's an unconscious process. Life is actually a systemic win. But I think we need to be doing it really consciously. So I want to make an invitation to you. Let's have a systemic win conversation where we're making the world better for each other. My world, your world, the BeCollaboration world, the world beyond. Let's do it really consciously. You up for that?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant.
But if you ask any person that, in the right mind, they would say yes, and then we look at the world and go, well, what's going on? I don't think we feel like the world is working for everyone. We notice there's wars, there's famine, there's disease, there's huge amounts of debt. What's happening? How would systemic win explain that?
Well, you see, I would say evolution is systemic win. But evolution is a really slow, painful process. Things go extinct. And I'd say that's actually the challenge for humans. We're been on an amazing up, but if we don't look after our environment, whether it's the inner environment or the environment around us, there's really major problems coming up. It's more likely we'll be the next dinosaurs than we will be going on forever. We've got to actually work really hard and intelligently, or play actually, to bring that about. So it's like, are we going to go up and keep going up? We're going to go up and crash, and we're teetering on the edge, I think.
I think what you just said at the beginning, are we consciously going to choose systemic win? Until it's vocalised like that, we would have sat down and gone, this is going to be a nice conversation, or we're going to challenge each other, and we would have hoped it would have come out. But by saying, is it going to be consciously systemic win, is kind of set us up now for going, there's a different way of doing it than we would normally do it. And I've always been shocked whenever I've gone through an exercise of watching how I think. And I always show off that I'm a very positive person. I'm a Pollyanna. I'm always seeing the bright side. But then when you actually allow yourself to listen to that monkey brain, probably 70%, if not more, is negative. So actually, in a conversation, when you are purposefully setting yourself up for systemic win, you kind of have to go, I can't do that. I can't be that kind of negative. What if? So we're going to have a conversation and challenge, but that's a different aspect to kind of being in this downward spiral of but. It's the different space.
But to me, it's also important is that our biggest learnings actually come from what doesn't work, and actually then making something that does work. So something like flying is a really good example of that. Humans aren't meant to be able to fly, and yet it's now safer to fly than it is to drive a car. There was a really amazing thing after the Twin Towers came down. Lots of people thought flying was too dangerous, and they drove, and more people died in the routine driving than actually died in the Twin Towers. So more people trying to be safe actually made themselves more dangerous. But the flying is because we've learnt from mistakes and all the crash and accidents, it's now safer. So the mistakes have actually turned into something that's an amazing gift.
Before we get too far ahead, I remember a while back, last time I've heard you speak about systemic a number of times, but you used to use the body metaphor, didn't you, about how the body interacts with each other. and that's a good example of a systemic win-lose kind of principle. Is that a good? Would you explain like that today, or do you have different ways of explaining it?
I think we'll cover that in a bit, because that's a bit one of the things we need to talk about. Is systemic win is about being not selfish but being self-interested. And there's something that's really unique to systemic win, I would say, because people say, oh, you shouldn't be selfish, you've got to be altruistic, and then you say, well, okay, but the mum who doesn't look after herself can't look after her kids. But then lots of people are very selfish, and young kids are really selfish. And it's like there's a journey of selfish, I would say, is when you're really just, what I want right now, I don't care about anything else, consequences irrelevant. So the selfish is short-term, immediate, very narrow, while self-interested is much bigger and wider, and I'd say systemically self-interested is what we should be aiming at. So there's a sort of progression from selfish to more self-interested, and having a sense of ourselves as part of all of this, not just, and all of it being part of us, not just a sort of me and it thing.
I think I remember during growing up in the 80s, we had Thatcherism, we had this kind of self-success and yuppies, and it was like...
Not in my background.
It was very much a self-interest, independent way of viewing the world, and it was like, well, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, what's happening elsewhere, as you take care of yours and your own, and you'll make it. And I never felt easy, I was always uneasy about that. But the thing is that we're highly interdependent, so we're not independent in any way. We rely on as other human beings for so many things. We rely on the plants and the other species for everything from our oxygen to pollination to clean air. And we've got this kind of a delusion that actually our self-interest is somehow honourable to look after me and my own, as opposed to having a concern. And I really kind of can differentiate between self-interest and selfishness, because self-interest has a concern for the environment, for what impact we have on each other. Whereas I think there's like a immaturity in us as a species at the level of selfishness or independent.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's in a family isn't selfish. Mums and dads are not selfish. They can't be good mums and dads by being selfish, but they can't. But at the same time, they can't neglect themselves either. Yeah. And that's part of what we need. And one of the things I think kids learn is to delay gratification. It's not just because I want it right now. It's like BeCollaboration is the whole thing of setting it up is saying it's something really amazing in the future, and we'll take time and make investments to create that incredible future. And we could have a nice, more comfortable time right now, but we'd rather use that to invest in the future.
Yeah, but the problem is technology in the last 10, 15 years, and we've started to distinguish people of kind of our generation.
We remember the telephone, but you had to do that.
We are definitely pre-digital. I mean, most of our socialising, our growing up, our identities were formed pre-digital. But now, you go, oh, I've got an idea, I want to bang. You can straight away, you have access to the planet's information for a touchpad on your hand.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is on one level. It's absolutely. It's like imagine a couple of hippies in the 70s saying, hey man, one day we had to just look into this mirror thing and it'll give you anything. Get out of here, man, you've had too much, But literally, that stimulation, we are hooked on that technology, we're hooked on that everything, everywhere. And in that experience, it's very, at a level, it's very it's an independent, self-absorbed interest.
So how are we going to make this practical? Because I don't know. Because it's really easy to go off into the sort of big ideas, and I guess my starting point with this was being really concerned about the environment, and not knowing whether technology was going to solve everything or whether environmental catastrophe was going to sort of undo everything. And this was back in the 80s, and I found that whichever side I was listening to, I was completely convinced by. So people who have really sort of aware of engineering technology could just paint a picture, wow, it's going to happen, and then someone would talk about the rainforests and the Amazon and all these things, and the fish being able to fish, and then I think, yeah, but they're right. And it's like, it's so easy to be convinced by people who have convinced themselves. And I think for me, the truth that both of them are true. Technology is amazing, but it's only a servant. But we can also completely destroy our habitat. And for me, systemic win is, how do we look after all these environments? Like, my body is an environment. More of my body isn't me. It's the things for whom I'm the entire universe, little creatures and stuff. And if I die, all of this stuff dies with me. It can't leave. At the same time, there's this massive planet that if it's not well, me, children, others, they're not going to be okay.
But many people trash their bodies, don't they? They eat wrong food, they drink too much, they don't exercise, they, I don't know, self-harm. There's loads of ways we do damage to even the most precious thing in our lives, is our own body.
Yeah.
So what hope we got for... I mean, I don't want to paint like a really negative picture, but I think there is...
Yeah. And at the moment, more people, the life expectancy across the world is longer now than ever.
We have got it better than we've had for many, many centuries.
Ever.
When you can... Exactly. And I think this feeling that people have of, I deserve this, when they've got so much already, and actually nobody deserves anything. It's about how we treat our planet, how we treat each other, and we don't really have that. The society that we live in is pulling for us to be isolated and independent and looking after our own and looking after ourselves and the rest of them. And until something like systemic win can come in and people can attach that what you do today has an impact, it has a ripple, it has an effect, going on and on and on, whether that's yelling out the car at somebody because someone was crossing the road when they shouldn't have been, or trolling somebody on Twitter, or writing a angry email to the Times. Whatever it happens to be, there are little things that people have to stop and understand the repercussions. And if systemic win is something that they have a handle on and an understanding of, it's opening up their eyes to the fact that we are all connected and we are all within a system, whether it's individual system or a massive system. One of the things I liked you describing at a BeCollaboration meeting one day was the tree and the system within the tree and the system without, and how it went on. I just want to explain that again now, because I thought that really illustrated well what you mean.
I mean, I think one of the things that we need to think of is that our identity doesn't exist just at one level. So, for instance, if I look out the garden, there's a tree out there. From a certain distance, it's really obvious it's a tree. Now, if I went up in a helicopter, actually, I would just see the woodland, or I'd see the housing estate, or whatever it was in the middle of, or I'd go further up and it would just be a bit of countryside. So that the tree would actually disappear. Equally, if I get really close to the tree, I just see a branch, I see a twig, I see a leaf, or I see part of a leaf, and I use the microscope. So there's just a right distance where something clearly exists. When you go smaller than that, you see all the parts that make it up. And when you go back out, you see it's part of something that's so much bigger. So it's like there's a very clear sense in it. I'm me and my body. We look at each other, it's really clear there's a person there. But it's not so easy to see you're a mum with kids. It's not so, that there is a bigger structure which you're really identified with. A good leader, so the family person thinks themselves as a family. They don't think of just, I just want this for me. The same thing happens with really good business leaders or really good politicians. They think of themselves as that whole, and they aren't just limited in being that little bit of it. But the other side to it is when you're really hungry, your stomach takes over your whole identity. It's like all the rest of you's gone. I just want something to eat right now. So sometimes it's right down at the level of a part of you.